Researching stocks used to mean juggling multiple websites, one for financials, another for key ratios, and a third for industry data. But then I found Finchat.io, and it's completely streamlined my stock analysis with detailed financials, KPIs, and even an AI Copilot. I now have everything I need in one place, saving me hours of research. In this video, I'll walk you through how I use Finchat to analyze stocks faster and smarter, and why I think it's a game changer for investors. Welcome to the channel, friends. Today's video is going to be different compared to my other videos. This video I'm going to be going through a website called Finchat. A lot of people might have heard of this website, or some of you might not have heard of this website, but once I came across this, I've been using this for the last 1 month and I think it's something really good and something worth sharing. Please note, this video is not being promoted by Finchat. However, there is an affiliate link which I will link in the description. If you did want to try Finchat for yourself, you will get a free 2-week trial with no card details required. And if you did want to go ahead with a Finchat subscription, you'll get 15% off with the link below. Okay, so going straight into it, if I go onto the dashboard, this is how Finchat looks. You've got a search bar at the top over here, which is AI powered, and you've got your own watch list over here. At the bottom, you can have multiple different watch lists, but I'm just going to show one of the watch lists over here. In this watch list, you've got a summary of the main US ETFs. You can add your own up here if you wanted. You've also got the stocks on your watch list as well. So you've got all these different stocks. You could see there are different metrics over here, such as market cap, stock price, the PE, forward PE, etc. This can all be changed yourself. So if I'm not interested in the forward PE and I only just want to see the normal PE, I can just get rid of the forward PE. And if I wanted to add something, I can just search metrics. So for example, if I want to search price to free cash flow, then I can have a column for this as well. So here's the price to free cash flow ratio. So everything the way I want it, I can personalize it how I want, all on one dashboard, and that's what you're seeing over here. There's 3 tabs here. So you've got the summary tab, you've got the performance, and you've got the news. So if I click on the performance, you'll see the same stocks, but you'll see the different performance. So how it's performed over the last day, over the last week, month, year to date, the CAGR of the last 3 years, 5 years, 10 years, etc. So you got everything in terms of performance over here. And if I click on news, then all of the news comes up over here. So if I click the segments and KPI, you could see things like Taiwan Semiconductor. They reported KPIs such as the different revenues. You've got things like AppLovin reporting things like in-app purchases and in-app advertising revenue and things like that for all of these different stocks. You could see earnings reports on this tab over here as well, and you've got an earnings calendar over here. So for example, Accenture, they have earnings coming up soon. So you've got everything you need to know about your stocks that's on your watch list all on this screen. You've got the media news as well if this is something that you're interested in. The next tab is something called analysis. So if you go on analysis, on this tab you can look at any stock of your choice and it'll show you more details about it. And for the purpose of this video, I'm going to be going through Google. So let's search the ticker Google, and it's the first one over here. And this will give you an overview of Google. There's a short description about what Google does. I'm sure Google doesn't need an introduction, but everything's here if you need it. You've got details about their CEO over here. You've got important metrics such as the market cap, the PE ratio. You've got information on their margins, such as their net margins. You've got their PEG ratio, and you've got a lot of details over here. You've also got their growth data over here. So their revenue has increased by 10% CAGR over the last 3 years, even more if you look at the 5 years and the 10 years. And it's the same with the earnings per share as well. So everything is all listed nicely over here. Looking over here, I can full screen this just to make it easier to see. You can see over the last 5 years, this is how Google has performed. I can turn that to max and you can see right from the start. And I can change this drop down to different things. What you're seeing right now is the price alone, but I can switch this to drawdowns. I find this very useful because you could see how much a company has gone down in history. So for example, the most Google has ever gone down from its all-time highs is 65%, which is here in 2008 crash. And second to that, probably around here, this area, so 2022, Google did have a greater than 40% drawdown over here. And this is good to know because if you've been watching my previous videos, I do look at how far companies have gone down in the past before from their all-time highs, just to have an idea of potentially where companies can go in the future as well. So this is useful information to have. You can also look at total return. This might not be relevant so much for Google, however it's really good when looking at dividend paying companies because it includes the return from the dividend as well as the return from the stock going up as well. If I change this back to just the price, the other good thing about this is I can add other stocks to this as well. So if I wanted to compare, I can do that. So if I add Microsoft over here, I can do that. And if I add the S&P 500, the SPY, then I can add that as well. And you can see I've got all three charts over here, and you could see how it's performed over the time. Microsoft has been performing well overall from the start, from inception. But if I look at in the last 5 years, I could see that Google is the winner. And if I switch to the 3 years, then again, we could see where everything stands and so on. If I look year to date, Google is performing the worst. It allows me to compare what different things are happening in the market at the moment. Okay, moving on, there's 9 different tabs at the top. What I've spoken through right now was the overview. Now moving on to the financials. This is a really useful tab because you've got so much data here, so much data, there's so many ratios, there's I think over 1,000 ratios that you can look at. In simple terms, you've got things like you can look at the revenue of how Google has been. I can switch it to quarterly or annually and I can have a look. And essentially I can take whatever I want from here and it will show me on the chart. So even if I add the earnings per share, I can add whatever I want and everything will be on here. It's really good because I've got things that I can add from the income statement. I can add things from the balance sheet and see how it's performed over time. On the cash flow statement, I can see things like the stock-based compensation. There's so many things that I can see. Ratios is a very good tab because there's a lot of trailing valuations that I can see. So for example, if I want to see the trend in the PE ratio, I can see that. Price to sales ratio. I can look at the forward valuations as well, such as these values over here. I can see the margins. So the EBITDA margin is the most important one I look at, and the operating margins. You've got the capital efficiency, all of these things that you can just have a look at. You could see the capital expenditure, the current and the quick ratio. You've got per share, so you can see how much capex per share is happening. You could see the free cash flow per share. There's also the number of employees, the common size. You've got dividends as well. Google only started dividends recently in the last year or so, but for other companies this might be very useful as well. The most impressive thing I've seen with Finchat is the segment and KPIs data that I can see. It's very hard to find how much money Google is actually making from YouTube or how much money Google is actually making from search. Likewise, it's very difficult to see how much money Apple is making through iPhones unless you're scrolling through all of the different investor relation letters and things like that. It becomes very difficult. However, with something like this, I've got all of the data over here, so you can see how much is from YouTube, Google search, subscriptions, cloud, etc. And there's just so much data that you could choose from, and it's different with different companies. So with Apple, you'll also be able to see how much they make from their iPhones, their MacBooks, etc. So just as an example, I'm just going to put the Google Cloud revenue, and you could see since 2019 how much they are making just from the cloud alone. I could also add some of the other metrics onto the chart as well. So if I add Google search, then you could see you've got the Google Cloud revenue and you've got the Google search revenue. And if I switch this to annual, it looks even more clear. You could see every year the Google search revenue is increasing every single year. So it's really good to see trends like this. And if I wanted to see only the last 5 years, then I can just change this to December 2020, and this only shows me data for the last 5 years. If I wanted to stack these charts, I could do that as well. We've seen that there's so much data to pick from with Finchat. So what I've done is there's a tab called custom metrics. Here I've put metrics that I look at specifically all on one page. So rather than me having to scroll through all of the different ratios, etc., from the income, balance sheet, the cash flow statements and the ratios tabs, I've put it all onto one screen over here, which I can see for all of the stocks. Of course, this doesn't include the segments and KPIs section because this is different for every stock that I look at. But for everything else, I've kind of summarized what I personally look at on one screen. Just as an example, if I'm interested in the EBITDA margin, and if I'm interested to see how much free cash flow per share there is, then I can have a look at it over here. Let me just cross off the other things. So in purple over here, you've got the free cash flow per share, and then the EBITDA margin is here in orange. And just having a look at it, the EBITDA margin is increasing over the last few years, and the free cash flow per share is in an uptrend as well. So Google looks really good in that sense. Other things that I like looking at is how much stock-based compensation happens. So for example, with Google, their stock-based compensation has been in an uptrend since 2013, and that's not good to see because it hurts the shareholder value. But if I add on the revenue that Google makes, you could see the actual stock-based compensation that Google does as a percentage to the revenue is much smaller because the revenue is increasing so much, but the stock-based compensation is not increasing the same amount. And I can further prove this by taking the stock-based compensation to revenue. And you can see this is as a percentage of the actual revenue, how much stock-based compensation that's been happening. And over the last couple of years, it's been decreasing from 7.3% to now 6.5%. But generally speaking, the stock-based compensation Google does not go above 7.5%. It's never happened before. So this is just something interesting to note. And likewise, all of these is for you to choose from. You can add your own metrics that you want to look at, and you can even make your own metric as well. So if you wanted to see how much the cloud revenue was per country, that's something that you can make. So it's really interesting. This is a new feature that came out literally last week. The next thing on Finchat is the next tab, which is investor relations. Here you could see all of the earnings calls, all of the slides and things like that, you could see everything over here. So for example, this is the earnings report. You've got the transcript as well over here. And there's just so much that you can see. You can also have a listen to the earnings call as well. So if I click play, this would be playing the actual earnings call. I can skip to the Q&A. I can change the speed if I want as well. And these are just really good features to have. The next thing is the estimates tab. This is really good because you could see what analysts are saying for the future of Google. And if I break this down further, there's different things. So you can see the analyst estimates for the revenue, the earnings per share, which is what you commonly see on most websites. But here, there's just so much more that you can see. So there's also predictions for their capital expenditure. And it's just really good to have these things. So we're currently in 2025, and by the end of the year, the consensus is that Google will make around $390 billion in revenue. And if I scroll down, you've got a high and a low, and then you've got the mean as well. And the mean is 390, which I showed above. And that would be an 11% growth from the previous year, so from 2024. The high end of the estimates is just under 400 billion, and then the low end of the estimates is 380 billion. So that would represent just under a 10% gain from the previous year. And there's 57 analysts looking at it, and generally speaking, when 57 analysts are making on something, then it tends to be correct. And I can look at 2027. Generally speaking, I only like to look at this year, and I don't like to look more than 2 years forward. So up until 2026, so next year, I'd be happy looking at just that. But anything more than that, it becomes unreliable because it's very hard to predict what's going to happen in the future. We don't know if there's going to be a recession, and there's just many factors that are not considered. So just like we've done with the revenue, you can do the same thing with the earnings per share. There's the same thing with the price targets as well, what analysts are saying. So by next year, the average consensus is Google with a share price of about $210. There's a high end target, there's a low end target as well. And it's just interesting to see. You've got the EBITDA margin targets, you've got the EBIT, you've got the free cash flow, you've got the NAV per share, you've got the book value per share, and there's capital expenditure per share. So there's lots of different things that you can have a look at. The next thing is ownership. I don't really pay too much attention to this tab because you've got information on the insiders, how much they own, any trades that they've done as well. You could see it over here. You could see what main companies are holding it. So for example, BlackRock, they own 6% of Google. Vanguard, they own about 7% of shares in Google. So these are just, I don't use this tab that much, but it's just interesting to see sometimes. The next thing is the industry tab. In the industry tab, this will show competitors or companies similar to Google. So for example, over here, you've got Microsoft, you've got Amazon, you've got Meta, you've got other companies over here as well. And you can organize it the way you want. If you think that there's a company missed, you can always add it on over here. if I want to add CRM, for example, Salesforce, then I've added that and it's here right at the top. And I can also add different metrics. So if I'm not interested in forward EV to sales, I can just cross that off and I can add something like market cap, which is important to know. I can switch this to billion so it's easier to read. And I think it's useful to see the price to operating cash flow. So I can add this too. And there's many different things. I can sort this by market cap. So the biggest market cap at the top, then the bottom. So Microsoft goes at the top, then Google, Amazon, etc. And whichever metric I can think of, I can just add it on over here. And I can compare and make a table and see which company looks the best from whichever ones I've selected. You've got data on dividend as well. They've only started paying a dividend since last year, so there's not too much data yet. You can also see if there's been any stock splits done, so this data would be shown over here. Then the next tab is modeling. This is more of a calculator if you want to add your own numbers and project where the price is going to be in the future. That would be done over here. I'm not fully aware in terms of how to use this fully yet. I don't know what a lot of this means and it's still something that I need to learn. However, for example, if I wanted to change, Google, for example, is going to increase their revenue by 14% this year. Whoops, not 140, 14%. Then I can just play around with some of the numbers and just see where I think the share price might go to. But again, like I said, I don't fully know how to use this yet, but when I do, then I'll start using it in my videos and you'll see. There's a tab also for filings. This just shows any legal documents that Google has filed to the government or anything. That's all going to be over here. So now that we've done that, the next thing would be the charting tab. This one's very interesting and I really like it, so let's go straight to it. Here we could compare different metrics to different companies and we could just do so much with it. So let me start by adding Google to it. And let's have a look at revenue, just as an example of a metric. Google's revenue has been increasing every single year since 2015 or since it came out. But I want to know, how does that compare against something like Microsoft? So I would just search for Microsoft. And Microsoft's chart is over here. So in orange, you've got the revenues for Microsoft, and then in blue, you've got the revenues for Google. And you could see how that's changed over time. And currently, Google makes a higher revenue than Microsoft. In the year 2016, after that is when Google flipped Microsoft and started earning more. So things like this is interesting to see. What I use it for though is looking at data. So for example, we know Microsoft, they have their own cloud services. We know Google has their own cloud services and we know Amazon has their own cloud services. So I want to compare and see which ones do the best and how each of them perform. So if I wanted to do that, then I could just search for Google Cloud over here and we could see Google Cloud revenue here. And then I want to know Microsoft Cloud revenue. And that would be over here. And if I even add on Amazon Cloud revenue, the AWS, I can add that on as well. So what I've done here is I've added on all of the cloud revenues, but let me just take out the revenues tab over here. And you could see over here that Microsoft, it makes the most money from their cloud revenue. Second to that would be Google, and then we're talking Amazon. So it's really good to be able to compare these things, and it's just endless in terms of what you can compare. You can compare different metrics, you could compare simple metrics, KPIs, there's so much. So if I cross these all out and I want to compare price to operating cash flow, Google currently trades at a price to operating cash flow of 17, whereas Microsoft trades at a price to operating cash flow of 23. So Google is significantly cheaper than Microsoft just on this metric alone right now. And that's good to see. And if I want to add forward PE, let's do that as well. So if I hide this, and now I'm looking at the forward PE. Google 19, Microsoft 28. So Google's trading cheaper. So these things, they're very interesting to see. I think it's just very useful. There's many things that you can do to this. The next thing is a screener, and I think screener is very, very useful, and I really like this feature because in the screener, you could basically choose any company worldwide. A lot of screeners that I've used in the past, they mainly have just US stocks and a few select Chinese stocks or a few European stocks. But this one, what I've noticed, is got stocks from all countries, and I think it's really good because because if you did want to diversify, you've got a screener that looks at stocks from different countries as well, and I think it's really useful. The way I would use this is I would set metrics that I want to look at. So I think it's good to look at market cap because you don't want to invest in companies which are too small. And let's just say I want a market cap of 10 billion or more. So when I press run screener, then it'll give me the results. So if I want to add further metrics, so I'm interested in companies that has a net income of more than 20% a year. So I'd go on net profit margin, and I want companies with 20% or more. So let's press run screener. There's 548 stocks out there that has that. And let's just say I want to look at companies which are profitable only. So if I go on price to operating cash flow, it has to be a minimum of 0. And now it's 413. So the possibilities are endless. You've got so many metrics. There's over 1,000 metrics that you can choose from. But once you've done it, you can sort it by market cap, and it will show you all of the different companies. So US stocks, for example Apple, if you hover over info, then it tells you everything that Apple does. And you've also got international stocks. Here you've got Saudi Arabian oil company. If you press info, it will tell you more about that. This is something you won't find on US exchanges, and it'll tell you which exchange you can find it on. Here we've got Taiwan Semiconductor, and if I continue scrolling down, you've also got some Chinese companies, so you've got Tencent Holdings as well. Now let's just say I did not want any Chinese companies, then all I would do is I would search China, I'd select it, and I'd press exclude. So now if I run the screener, it will exclude Chinese companies. And I went down from 413 to now 350 stocks. And if I also wanted to exclude tobacco companies, as an example, then I can do that, and I can press run screener, and that comes down as well. So the screener is really good, and there's lots of different screens that you can have, so you can make your own tabs for different screens, and this should hopefully help you with searching for new stocks. The next thing is the resources tabs. So here you've got an earnings calendar which will show you any future earnings coming up, but you've also got ETFs. This one's quite good because you can search for your own ETFs and it will show you the holdings of it. So here is the SPY, which is a tracking ETF for the S&P 500. 7% of it is made up by Apple. You've got Microsoft, Nvidia. You could see the top 20 holdings over here. So you've got so much information about ETF. If I search for another ETF such as a SMH, which is the semiconductor ETF, then this will show me everything as well. So you've got the performance over here. You've got all the same options that I showed you before, the drawdowns, etc. And you've got the holdings over here. So the biggest holding is Nvidia. You've got Taiwan Semiconductor, you've got Broadcom, you've got ASML, etc. And you've got it all written over here as well. So it's a pretty cool feature to have. Other useful things, you've got super investors. So there's a whole list of super investors. And if I click on Warren Buffett, for example, it will show me his portfolio in a nice visual manner. I can even look at it further over here, and there's a further breakdown over here. There's different companies. I can see the history as well. So for example, Apple, it used to make up at one point over 50% of his portfolio, but now it only makes up 28%. So it gives me even more detail such as that. The next thing, you've also got hedge fund letters. For example, Bill Ackman's Pershing Square. I can click on this and it will open their presentation that they had. And I can scroll through, I can look through whatever I want, but for the sake of the video, I'm not going to do that. So I'm going to cross this off. And now, last, I want to show the best and the most important feature of Finchat, and that would be the Copilot. Let's say you found your stock. You found a stock that you've liked. You've looked through all the metrics. You've done all the research you wanted to for the stock. However, you still have a few questions. You can get most of it answered on this one page, and it will give you the sources as well. What Copilot will do is it's trained to look through all of the investor relations, the metrics, everything that's on Finchat, all of the data, and online as well. It will go through everything to try and get you an answer. An example I want to give is to know whether a company has a wide moat or not. It's not easy to know that. There's not a specific metric that tells you, okay, it's a wide moat, it's a narrow moat. It's something that you have to figure out, or analyst has to analyze and then come up with an answer whether it's narrow moat or not. So here I can do just that. We were looking at Google in this video, and I can ask Copilot, does Google have a wide moat, a narrow moat, or no moat? I can ask all these questions to Copilot, and you could see it's acquiring data, it's reading through the earnings calls, the transcripts, the reports. It'll go through all of the metrics as well. And here we've got our answer. So Alphabet, so Google, it has a wide economic moat. It's not just told us that it's got a wide economic moat and just left it as that. It's actually giving us reasons why as well. So this table below will tell us why. It has all of these different reasons as to why Google has a wide economic moat. And you can do this for any company. And if I continue scrolling down, you've got the reports over here, and I can ask further questions. Now I'm going to ask what the direction of the moat is, because a company can have a wide moat, but then another company might be eating into the company's competition, and so the direction for this specific company I'm talking about, the direction of the moat might not be in the right direction. So let's ask Copilot this. What is the direction of Google's moat? And here we're getting our answer. The direction of Google's moat is towards strengthening and expanding. So their moat is increasing. Sorry, it's still typing, that's why it's going up and down, but once it's finished typing, I'll be able to show it properly. Over here, it tells you that the moat is increasing. So that's a good thing. That's what you want to see. So that's everything with Finchat so far. There's so many more features. However, I've not gone through everything, and I've not been able to use a lot of things myself because I've only had this membership for 1 month, and I just think it's a really good tool, and it saved me a lot of time. Just for completeness, since we were talking about Google, I did want to mention that it is a stock that I purchased, and I just feel that Google is really undervalued at the moment. Yes, there's potential that it might still continue coming down, but I don't mind dollar cost averaging my price down, because right now, the things I've been looking at, for example, an increasing revenue, their net profit margins also increasing, their free cash flow per share increasing every single year, their EBITDA margin increasing, their price to operating cash flow being lower than average. Just all of these things put together, and their total shares outstanding. So with Google buying back their shares, I think Google's value is really good. They have double digits predicted to grow every single year revenue for the next few years. Their earnings per share is due to increase. They're going to continue buying back their shares. They're trading below their average price to earnings ratio. They're trading below their price to operating cash flow ratio. They have increasing revenues. It's a very stable company, and I think Google at the moment is one of the most undervalued companies in the Magnificent Seven. And for that reason, Google is a buy for me. So if you've liked this video, please like and subscribe, and I'll be posting more. And if you've liked Finchat, then follow the link in the description below, and you'll get a 2-week free trial, and there's no card details required. Thank you for watching.